To Pauletta Rodari and to all friends of her different skin colors by Selina, Chevik. Once upon a time there lived Mr. Bianchi. He lived in the city of Varese and was an employee of one trading company that was selling medicine. Every week, 6 days out of 7, he traveled all over Italy for work. He traveled east and west, north and south, and all over again. Sundays he spent at home along with his daughter, and on Mondays, as soon as the sun rose, he set off again. Still, every night before going to bed, his daughter always reminded him, "Do you remember that I am waiting for a new fairy tale tonight? I must tell you that this girl could not sleep until she was told a fairy tale." Her mother would have told her everything she knew, fairy tales, fables, and just stories. It was not enough for a little girl. No matter where her father was, he was calling her every night at exactly 9 o'clock to tell a new fairy tale. He'll make them up immediately, right during the phone call with her. As you noticed, the stories are not very long. After all, Mr. Bianchi had to pay for a phone call, so he could not talk too long. Still, he sometimes allowed himself to talk longer. Finally, Mr. Bianchi collected all the stories in one book. Telephone Tales. I will tell you a secret. When Mr. Bianchi called his daughter, even the switch workers will freeze and listen with pleasure. Even I like some of them.
Telephone Tales. The History of the Kingdom of Heavy Eaters by author Sumeiko. Once upon a time, in ancient kingdom of heavy eaters, which lied east of Duchy of Drain Them Dry, lived a king called Iron Stomach. He was named this way for eating a pasta together with plates on which they were served. It was a crunchy meal, however his stomach was perfectly able to digest it. He was succeeded on the throne by the heavy eater II, named the 3 Spoons, because he ate soup with 3 silver spoons at once. 2 of the spoons the king held himself, and the queen was helping him with the 3rd one. If the spoon wasn't full, the king was punishing the queen. The heavy eater's kingdom throne resided at the head of a huge table. All day long, the table was laden with dishes and littered with all kinds of food. Eventually, the throne was succeeded by Heavy Eater III, Snack Lover. Heavy Eater IV, Pork Chop. Heavy Eater V, Always Hungry. Heavy Eater VI, Stuffed Turkey. Heavy Eater VII, Give me more. He was famous for eating up his own crown, which, by the way, was made of wrought iron. Heavy Eater VIII, Cheesy Crumb. They say that when there was no single crumb left on the table, he ate a tablecloth. Heavy Eater IX, Steel Jaw. He ended up eating the throne with all the pillows. That was the end of the Heavy Eaters dynasty.
Gianni Rodari, Telephone Tales. How One Man Bought Stockholm by Medina Quliyeva. Everybody visits a bazaar in Gavirati. Of course, you can find scumbags there who sell useless trinkets. Once, at the Gavirati fair, appeared a man who was selling some very unusual things like Mount Blanc, the Alps, and Indian Ocean. This man was such a good talker that in 1 hour he sold almost everything. The only thing that was left was the city of Stockholm. A hairdresser bought it. Instead of paying, he shaved the merchant and refreshed his cologne. Then he hung his purchase certificate on the wall. The certificate stated that he is the owner of the city of Stockholm. The hairdresser proudly presented this document to all of his clients and was happy to answer their questions.
This is a city in Sweden, and not just some ordinary town. It's a capital. More than 1 million people live there. All of them, of course, belong to me. It's surrounded by sea, but I'm not familiar with its owner yet.
Little by little, the hairdresser saved up money for the trip, and a year later, finally, took a trip to Sweden. One must finally look at his possessions. The man really liked Stockholm. He found it a beautiful city, and the Swedes, their friendliest people. Still, there was one issue. The Swedes did not understand what he was telling them, and he did not understand a word from what they were answering him.
Do you know who the owner of your city is? Have you been told that I am the owner?
The Swedes smiled and nodded their heads as if answering yes. After all, they did not understand what he was saying, but they were polite and well-mannered people. Infinitely satisfied, the hairdresser rubbed his hands.
Such a beautiful city. Just think how cheap it costs me. I just got off with a haircut and a cologne.
Yet, the hairdresser was wrong. He paid too much for it. He overpaid. He was not aware that every born child owns the whole world and does not need to pay anything for it. Not a single penny. One only needs to roll up his sleeves, work hard, and everything on earth will be in his hands.
Telephone Tales. A Tale About One Young Lobster by Amina Abbasova. Once upon a time, a young lobster wondered why all of my relatives move the same way, backward. I feel I can learn to move the other way, forward. For instance, like a frog, lets my tail fall off if I don't get what I want. The lobster began to train among the stones in his native creek. At first, it took him a lot of effort. With every step he made, he stumbled upon something. He was hit by the creek shells and clung his claws one to the other. Gradually, things went better with him. After all, everything in the world can be learned, if one will. When the lobster felt confident, he came to his relatives and said, "Look here!" And he proudly passed in front of them, but not backing off like all crayfish, but moving ahead. "My son," cried his mother, "haven't I told you to be wise? Walk back, honey, move backwards, dear, the way all regular lobsters do." His brothers just giggled. Father looked sternly at the young lobster and said, "Enough! If you want to live with us, move the normal lobster way. If you are doing everything your own way, then go away and never come back. The stream is large. There is enough room for everyone." Brave Lobster loved his relatives very much, but he was too stubborn, and he had no doubts that he was right. He hugged his mother, said goodbye to his father and brothers, and set off to faraway lands, to the other end of the stream. The frogs, who were about to gossip on a large water lily, were amazed of how a young lobster was moving forward and lively began to discuss it. God, what is happening to this world, Kwa? Just look at this weird lobster. It's scary to even think, Kwa. What will happen to the humanity? Said one frog. What a shame. No respect for the old traditions, Kwa, agreed another. Oh, Kwa, the third sighed, looking at the young lobster. The young lobster did not pay attention to them and went on. Suddenly, he heard someone calling him. He looked around and saw an old, large, and very sad lobster that lived under a stone as a real hermit. Good afternoon, the young lobster welcomed him. The old lobster looked at him and then said, Do you think you are making a bravery? In my youth, I wanted to teach all crayfish to move forward too. As you see, this is what happened to me. I live alone, and people would rather bite their tongue than speak to me. Listen to me before it's too late. Calm down and do everything the way other lobsters do. Later, you will thank me for this advice. The young lobster didn't know what to say. He kept silence and thought to himself. I'm still right. He said goodbye to the old hermit and stubbornly went on his way. How far will he go? Will he find his happiness? Will his life change? We do not know this, because he's still going his own way, with courage and determination. We can only wish him bon voyage.
Telephone Tales, The Giant's Hair by Murad Seyidzadeh. Once upon a time there lived 4 brothers. 3 of them were very short and very sly, and the 4th one was a giant. Unlike his brothers, he was a very strong but simple person. His power was in his hands, and wisdom was in his hair. Yet, his brothers would clip the giant's hair as short as possible, to reduce his wisdom, and forced him to work for all of them. His brothers were happy to have him working for them, and stuffed their pockets with money. The poor giant had to serve them with everything. He plowed a field, he chopped wood, spun a mill wheel, and pulled a cart instead of an ox. Still, the brothers watched the giant all the time, so that the hair would not grow long. "You're looking good with a short haircut," said one. "I agree. True beauty is not in curls," noticed another. "Look, this strand of hair is too long for him. We must shorten it tonight," suggested the third, and they laughed and started pushing each other sideways. Later, they went to the pub to have fun, and the giant brothers had to wash their cart. As the giant needed to be strong for work, his brothers fed him very well. They also served him wine whenever he wanted. Still, it was only one type of wine, the one that flows from the fountain. Once the giant felt ill, the brothers feared that they might lose a good servant if he dies. Therefore, they called the best doctors, they bought him the most expensive medicine, and even started serving breakfast in bed. "See how we love you. Don't even think to die. Do not joke with us. Stay safe." The brothers were so worried about his illness that they completely forgot about his hairstyle. So the hair grew and became very long. The giant was becoming wiser. He began to reason more and took a closer look at his brothers. He became more attentive to everything around him. Finally, he realized what kind of greedy people his brothers were. In the beginning, he told them nothing. He was waiting for his recovery. One morning, when the brothers were still sleeping, He got up, tied them up, and loaded them all into a cart. "Where are you taking us? Where are you taking your loving brothers?" they pleaded. "You will find out soon," the giant replied. He brought them to the train station, put them on the train, still tied up, and said in the end, "Leave now and never come back. You made fun of me so many times. Enough, I am my own boss now." The engine whistled and the train departed. The three cunning brothers sat quietly. No one ever saw them again.
Telephone Tales at the Ostia beach by Melissa Chevik. There's a small town Ostia located on the seashore, not far from Rome. In summer, Romans go to swim and sunbathe there. So many people visit the beach that it is as crowded as can be. Whoever comes to the beach late finds no room for himself. One day, a strange but a very cheerful mister came to the beach. He arrived the latest and, of course, did not find a place to stick in his umbrella. He opened it, twisted the handle a little, and suddenly the umbrella rose up in the air by itself. It flew to the very shore of the sea, over thousands of other umbrellas that stood on the sand. Still, it never touched the ground, because there was nowhere to land. The umbrella hung in the air 2 to 3 meters above the ground. The ingenious mister opened his deck chair, and it too hung in the air. The strange mister sat in the chair in the shade of the hanging umbrella, took a book from his pocket and began to read it, enjoying the salty and healing sea air. At first, nobody noticed him. Everyone sat quietly under umbrellas. Some tried to find at least a bit of a sea view, because the people's heads were everywhere on the way. Others were sewing crossword, while the others were taking a nap. Nobody looked at the sky. Suddenly, something fell on one woman's umbrella. She thought it was a ball and stood up to scold the loud children. She looked around but did not find anyone. Looked up and saw a cheerful mister above her head hanging in his deck chair. "I'm sorry, I dropped my book on you. Would you please throw it back to me?" the mister told her. Lady was so surprised that she immediately felt like a knocker. Relatives ran up to her and helped her to get up. The lady was so fat that she herself could not get up. She was not even able to utter a word with fright, and only silently pointed her finger at an umbrella hanging in the air. "Please," he repeated, as if nothing happened. "Throw me back my book." "Don't you see that you scared our aunt?" the man heard from somebody. "I'm sorry, but I did not want this." "Get down from there. Hanging in the air is prohibited." "Nothing like this. I settled here because there is no place on the beach. I also paid the entrance fee." Now all the people on the beach saw the cheerful mister so far. Everyone began to point a finger at him and laugh aloud. "Look at him," people said. "He probably has an umbrella with a rocket engine there." "Mr. Gagarin," one boy shouted, "take us with you." One boy threw the book back. A strange mister opened his page and continued reading. Finally, people calmed down and stopped paying attention to him. Only children kept looking at him with curiosity, and the bravest one shouted, "Hey, mister!" "What?" "Teach us to fly." The man snorted in response and continued reading. In the evening, the umbrella flew over the entire beach with a slight whistle. The inventive mister landed on the road right by his motorcycle, sat on it, and drove off. No one ever found out what kind of a man he was and where he managed to buy such an umbrella.
Telephone Tales. King Midas by Jasmine Young. King Midas was a terrible spender. In his kingdom there was no day without a feast, nor night without a ball. So it was clear enough that one fine day he had no single centesimo left. He went to the wizard Apollo and told him about his misfortune. The wizard decided to put a spell on him. "Everything your hands touch will turn into gold," the wizard said. King Midas jumped with joy and happily ran to his car. As soon as he touched the door, the car immediately turned into gold. Everything became golden. Golden wheels, golden windows, a golden motor. Even gasoline turned into a piece of gold. It was clear that the car would no longer move. So his servants had to use a wagon and a pair of oxen to tow a car to the royal palace. King Midas began to walk through the halls, touching everything. Tables, chairs, cabinets, and everything was becoming golden. Finally, the king got thirsty. He ordered to bring a glass of water. But as soon as he picked it up, the glass turned into a piece of gold, and the water also ceased to be water. So the servant had to give the king water with a spoon. It was lunchtime. The king took the fork. It turned into gold. The guests clapped their hands and vied with each other to beg the king. "Your Majesty, touch the buttons on my jacket." "Touch my umbrella, Your Majesty." King Midas made everyone happy, and when he finally took a piece of bread to eat, the bread turned into gold. The queen had to feed the king with this porridge with a spoon. The guests hid under the table because they could not help laughing. King Midas got angry and pulled one of his guests by his nose. The nose immediately turned golden. The poor man got scared. It was time to go to bed. King Midas touched the pillow, and it turned into gold. Touched the sheet and mattress, and yes, instead of the bed, there was a pile of gold. A very hard one. A man can never sleep in such a bed. The king had to spend the night in an armchair, holding his hands up. The next morning, the king was exhausted, and with the first lights ran to his wizard Apollo, and so that he would disenchant him. Apollo agreed. "Good," he said, "but be careful. Witchcraft will vanish in exactly 7 hours and 7 minutes. All this time you should not touch anything. Otherwise, everything you touch will turn into a dung." Satisfied, King Midas left and began to count minutes. Unfortunately, his watch was gaining a minute every hour and was showing the wrong time. When 7 hours and 7 minutes passed, according to his watch, King Midas opened the door of his car and got into it. He sat down and ended up in a large dunghill because it was 7 minutes till the end of witchcraft.
Telephone Tales, Blue Traffic Light by Luiza Simanovska. Once the traffic light in Milan in Piazza Duomo made an oddity. All of its lights suddenly turned blue, and people no longer knew how to act. Do we cross or do not cross the street? The traffic light spread the unusual blue signal in all directions, so blue that even Milan's sky had never been so blue. Waiting to understand something, the motorists beeped, the bikes roared, the arrogant pedestrians shouted, "You don't know who I am." The witty laughed. The rich have eaten the green to build another cottage in the countryside. They used red to dye fish in the aquarium. Do you know what did they do with the yellow? They added it to the olive oil. Finally, a police officer arrived and stood in the middle of the street to untangle the traffic. Another police officer looked for the control box to repair the fault and turned off the power. Before going off, the blue traffic light had time to think. "Poor things,
I had given the blue light signal for heaven. If they understood me, now everyone would know how to fly. Perhaps, however, they didn't have enough courage.
Telephone Tales: How Alice Traveled Under the Sea by Aida Bagirova. Once Alice went swimming to the sea. She liked it so much that she never wanted to get out of the water. "Alice, stop it! Get out!" shouted her mother. "Give me a second, Mom," answered Alice. "I will stay in the water until I turn into a fish," thought Alice. Since then, every night before she went to bed, she would go to the mirror and would watch if the fins or silver scales would begin to appear on her body. Each time, she would find only a few grains of sand on her shoulders because she did not wash herself too carefully. One morning, she came to the beach earlier than usual and met a boy who was collecting sea urchins and shellfish. The boy was the son of an angler and knew everything about the sea. "Do you know how to turn into a fish?" Alice asked him. "Well, it's a piece of cake," the boy answered. "I can show it to you now." He jumped into the sea. A minute passed. Another passed. But the boy did not appear. Suddenly, at the same very place, a dolphin appeared. The dolphin began to play in the waves, and a cheerful fountain of water appeared in the sky. The dolphin played by Alice's feet, but she was not afraid of him. They would play for a long time. Finally, the dolphin waved its tail and disappeared in the water. At the same moment, the boy appeared. "See how easy it is." "I see," replied Alice. "I probably can never do this." "You should try." Alice jumped into the water. She really wanted to become a starfish. Then she has got into trouble. Alice stuck inside a large shellfish. While it was yawning, as soon as Alice touched the shellfish, it shut and locked Alice inside with all her dreams. "Well, as always, I'm in trouble," the girl thought. She suddenly thought of her mom. Poor mother probably thinks her daughter is dead yet. Then she thought of her dad, who's supposed to come from city tonight. Then she thought of her dad, who's supposed to come from city tonight because it was Saturday. "No, I can't leave them alone. They love me so much. This time I'll be back." With all her energy, she rested her arms and legs on the sides of the shell, pushed, opened them up, slipped out, and quickly swam back to the surface. Alice ran home. She never told anyone about what happened to her at the seaside.
Telephone Tales about Appolonia who knew how to cook jam best of all by Nailya Nuraliyeva. Appolonia in San Antonio, which is near Lake Lago Maggiore, was the only woman making jam in a very special way. The jam was so delicious that people from all the valleys nearby came to her to try it. Thus, in good weather, San Antonio was full of visitors. From Valcuvia and Otravaglia, from Dominina and Poverina, people sat down to relax on low stone fence from where one could admire the view of the lake and then go to Appolonia. "Could you make us some blueberry jam?" "Sure," answered Appolonia. "A plum jam for me, please." "You're welcome." Appolonia had true golden hands. Once, a poor woman from Archimedes visited her. The woman was so poor that she did not even have a handful of peach seeds to make jam. She had just picked up chestnut shells to fill her apron along the way to Appolonia. "Appolonia, can I have a jam too, please?" she asked. A jam from chestnut shells?" exclaimed the surprised Appolonia. I have nothing else." "Well, I'll try." Appolonia decided to try, and finally cooked such a delicious jam. No one had ever tried this before. Another time, a poor woman from Archimedes did not even find chestnut shells, because dry leaves had already covered them. So she picked up nettles and filled her apron. "Appolonia, can you make another jam for me?" A jam from nettles?" "I did not find anything else." "Well, I'll try." Appolonia took the nettles, covered them with sugar, boiled them, the way nobody knew how to do it. "Here you go, the most delicious jam ever, that makes you lick your fingers after you try it." Appolonia had true golden hands. She could do jam even from stones. Once, the king drove by passing San Antonio. He wanted to try the famous jam too. As soon as he reached Appolonia, she gave him a saucer with jam. The king took a spoonful, tried it, and saw a fly that accidentally appeared in the jam. "It is disgusting," said the king. "How could you?" "I am so sorry, but if the jam was not good, the fly wouldn't have stuck in it," answered Appolonia. However, the king was very angry and ordered his soldiers to chop off Apollonia's hands. Then the people got angry at the king and declared that if he chopped off Apollonia's hands, they would take off his head with the crown, because there will always be a head to wear a crown, but you will never find such hands as Apollonia's. The king accepted his defeat.